as medical groups, we are not the ones that are playing politics here. We are asking for good healthcare for our patients. We're basing that off of the data that exists in the literature, as well as what we're seeing with our own eyes in our emergency rooms, the patients that are suffering, the patients that are dying, our preborn patients that are dying as a result of these dangerous drugs. So we are not the ones playing politics. We are not being led by political winds. We are not being led by the election cycle. We are being led by hard science, and we are being led by compassion for our patients and care that all of our patients deserve dignity and deserve excellent health care.
All right, guys, welcome back to Caring for Both, a Curbside Consult Series by the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or AAPLOG. On this podcast, we're bringing on experts to provide insights to support you as a medical professional in your life-affirming practice and career. I'm your host for today, Jordan Butler, the Communications Manager for AAPLOG. It seems like we just started off 2026, which we did, but AAPLOG is starting off strong. Today, we're joined by none other than Dr. Christina Francis, the CEO of AAPLOG, who has recently spearheaded a letter to the FDA and the HHS after reports that they were slow walking their promised review of mifepristone. Now, Dr. Francis is going to get into this a little bit more, but just as a quick summary, this letter is calling for urgent action on the safety review of mifepristone, the first drug in the 2-pill regimen, commonly referred to as a chemical or a drug-induced abortion. So just for a little bit of background, when the FDA first approved mifepristone in 2000, it did so under strict safeguards: in-person dispensing, confirmation of gestational age, screening for ectopic pregnancy, and of course, very importantly, in-person follow-up care. These measures were designed to reduce risks like hemorrhaging, infection, and incomplete abortion, and to be sure that any complications were discovered in a timely manner. Over time, though, these safeguards have been dismantled, most notably when mail order distribution was allowed without any in-person evaluation under the former Biden administration. Now, these changes have contributed to over 60% of abortions in the United States now being done through chemical abortion pills. And that number could be much higher, given the fact that we don't have any sort of national abortion reporting law. And the FDA continues to cite a complication rate of less than 0.5%, despite new data suggesting rates are likely much higher. Now, Dr. Francis is going to help us unpack what these changes mean for women's health. We're going to talk a little bit about the letter that we sent, talking about the importance of informed consent for women and the integrity of medical oversight. Dr. Francis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. So this letter that AAPLOG has sent, along with other pro-life medical groups, what prompted you and AAPLOG to write this letter to the FDA and the HHS at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for people who have been listening to our podcast for a while, you will know that the issue of mifepristone, the dangers related to it, is something that AAPLOG has been involved with raising awareness of now for really nearly 3 decades. So Donna Harrison, my predecessor at AAPLOG, started working on this issue before it was even approved in the US in 2000. And so AAPLOG really is one of the nation's experts on the dangers associated with this drug. And as people may recall, last year in 2025, I believe it was in July, we initially sent a letter from AAPLOG and 5 other medical organizations asking FDA and HHS to conduct a very thorough safety review of this drug, something that is long overdue. We were promised by Commissioner McCary, and then even actually by Secretary Kennedy during a congressional hearing, even said that a safety review was happening. And of course, as you referenced in your opening, this came as a result of some new data that came out, which I know we're going to delve into in a minute more deeply, but data that was looking at real world complications related to the use of this drug. And so we were told that that review was being done. For an agency like the FDA to do this kind of review, it really shouldn't take more than just a few months to do that kind of review. And towards the end of 2025, there was reporting that came out stating that the FDA was potentially slow walking this review in light of the upcoming midterm elections, because I think for some people, the issue of abortion is seen as not a winning issue politically, which we can talk about that. Of course, we believe that that's not actually the case. But that really spurred us to lead another letter. And as you said, it's not just AAPLOG. We are joined by the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, the Christian Medical and Dental Associations, the Catholic Medical Association, and the American College of Pediatricians in sending this letter. And I should emphasize that these organizations together represent approximately 30,000 medical professionals from across the country.
Wow.
So it's not just a handful of people that are concerned about this. And so we sent this letter to FDA and HHS asking them to do their job, which is to protect the American public from dangerous drugs and to ensure that women who, oftentimes are in very vulnerable situations, who are feeling backed into a corner by, pregnancy that wasn't planned, or maybe social circumstances in their lives, and are really making this decision oftentimes under duress. We believe that regardless of the decision that they make, they deserve to have accurate information about the dangers associated with drug-induced abortion. And again, I know we're going to get into what those dangers are, but it's the FDA's job to provide accurate information, and not only to provide accurate information about the risks, but the risks specific to the way that these drugs are currently being dispensed, which, as you said, since the end of 2021, has been without any kind of in-person visit required. So women can just get online and order these drugs and have them mailed to them have them sent through the mail. So our doctors, including myself, I work as an OB hospitalist. We are seeing regular complications of this drug in our patients in emergency rooms. And we know that there are ways that the FDA could mitigate these harms to women. Certainly nearly every time these drugs are taken, a preborn child loses his or her life as well. They are a patient as well. We obviously are concerned about them. And so we are strengthening in 2026, we are strengthening our call to the FDA to say, this is unacceptable. We're tired of empty promises that we received last year. This safety review needs to be done immediately.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job of just summarizing the concerns that APLOG has and many other, pro-lifers out there. Now we talk a little bit about complication rate, and I think it can be easy to kind of skip over what exactly severe complication looks like. I remember you all did an episode with Rosalie, who talked about her early chemical abortion pill experience and the amount of blood that came down. It was very graphic and detailed. So you don't have to get quite into those details, but can you talk a little bit about what those severe complications are? And before you get into that, the letter that we're sending to the FDA has to do with this major study that shows a nearly 11% severe complication rate compared to the FDA's 0.5%. So kind of give us a little bit of meat about what exactly those severe complication rates, what that really looks like for women and how it affects them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, I think it's important that people understand the reality of what these drugs are and what they cause, and what women experience after they take them. Because of course, the pro-abortion or the abortion sort of industrial complex and their allies within the medical community will claim that these are benign drugs, that it's safer than taking Tylenol, that it's just like a heavy period when women have this kind of abortion. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so it's important for people to understand that. If we look at just even their baseline complications, so this is even when they're given under the quote unquote best of circumstances, so the most controlled circumstances, we still see a significant risk of hemorrhage. So really, really heavy bleeding. This oftentimes is much, much worse than even a heavy period. Women can bleed for up to 30 days even after taking these drugs. So not only can it be a significant amount of bleeding, but a prolonged period of bleeding as well. And in addition to that, they will deliver their baby as well. So that is obviously mentally very traumatic for women. And we know from stories that we've heard from patients and other women that have come to us with their stories that they oftentimes are not prepared for that. They're told that they're just going to pass a clump of tissue when in fact they deliver their baby and they see their baby, and then they, see firsthand what they have, the decision that they've made, and that's led to the loss of life of their child. We also see an increased risk of severe infections from these drugs, and that's for a couple of different reasons. One, the drug itself, mifepristone, actually has an effect on the woman's immune system, and it is an immune suppressant, making her more susceptible to certain kinds of infections, particularly one called Clostridium, which is a very dangerous kind of bacterial infection. And it's really dangerous because how it kills women, which it has a very high fatality rate, how it kills women is it actually releases toxins that then go throughout the woman's body and cause a very severe inflammatory response that can lead to multi-system organ failure.
Oh
So
my gosh.
the drug
Wow.
itself, yeah, makes them more susceptible to that particular infection, but also because the drug doesn't necessarily, or the two drug combination that the woman takes, oftentimes will leave pregnancy tissue or parts of the baby behind in the woman's body. And that, the tissue remaining, can also increase her risk of infection. And so this increased risk of infection is actually what led to a black box warning being placed on this drug in 2006 after 6 women died from this kind of severe infection after taking these drugs. So infection is another really significant concern. Like I said, bleeding, also an incomplete abortion. Like I said, where not all of the tissue is passed from the woman's uterus. She doesn't deliver all of that tissue. And so then that can lead to bleeding, it can lead to infection, and also leads to the need for a surgery, oftentimes an emergency surgery. In fact, I just saw a patient not that long ago at my own hospital that needed a surgery to complete her chemical abortion because she had tissue that remained behind.
Mhm.
So those are kind of the major, most common severe complications that we talk about. Of course, there are other ones. There's one that is really significant, which is an undiagnosed ectopic pregnancy. Now, you referenced the report that came out from actually 2 different groups, the Ethics and Public Policy Center and also the Foundation for the Restoration of America, both published data on insurance claims data related to complications. One of the complications that was looked at in that data set was undiagnosed ectopic pregnancies. And critics of that said, mifepristone doesn't cause ectopic pregnancy. No one's claiming that mifepristone causes ectopic pregnancy. However,
Right.
the danger is if a woman is not seen in person, and particularly if she does not have an ultrasound before she takes these drugs, there's no way of knowing whether or not she has an ectopic pregnancy or pregnancy outside of the uterus where it's supposed to be. The reason this is important is because this is a life-threatening condition for women. In fact, it's still, even in the US, the leading cause of maternal mortality in the first trimester of pregnancy is ectopic pregnancy. The problem is if we don't know that she has an ectopic pregnancy and she takes mifepristone and the second drug, misoprostol, those drugs do not treat ectopic pregnancy. So her pregnancy will continue to grow. And then the symptoms that she would experience that might alert her to the fact that something's wrong with her pregnancy are abdominal pain and vaginal bleeding. The problem with that is the symptoms of a chemical abortion are abdominal pain and vaginal bleeding. And so she's going to be told to expect those symptoms, that those are normal. It's a normal part of her abortion. And so then when she starts having those symptoms, she's not going to realize she needs to go and be seen emergently at the emergency room. And this is a condition in which minutes can make the difference between life and death for that woman. And so that is another really crucial factor in these complications, in that oftentimes this diagnosis is missed. And then she may either die from her ectopic pregnancy or not get treatment in a timely fashion. And so these are severe risks, again, that were present at baseline, but these risks are heightened now in the way these drugs are being dispensed. First of all, when this drug was first approved, it was only approved through 7 weeks of pregnancy because in the studies that looked at complications, they noted that starting at about 8 weeks of pregnancy, the rates of complications increased exponentially. And so that's why the decision was made only to approve it through 7 weeks of pregnancy. However, now it's available through 10 weeks of pregnancy officially. But as you said, now women don't even have to have an in person visit, which means that women are taking these drugs well into their second trimester. And this makes a difference. We know, again, this is based on not studies from pro lifers, based on studies actually from self proclaimed pro choice researchers that showed that if a woman takes these drugs at 10 weeks, her risk of needing an emergency surgery to complete her abortion or any surgery to complete her abortion is about 1 in 10 to 1 in 8, somewhere in there. If she takes them just 3 weeks later at 13 weeks, her risk of needing a surgery goes up to 1 in 3. So that is a significant increase in risk for her. And so we are seeing more severe complications. We're seeing them at an increasing rate because more women are taking these drugs, but also they're taking them without in-person evaluation. Not even to mention the coerced abortions that we know are happening. As you mentioned, we did a podcast episode with Rosalie, who's suing the FDA actually over the fact that in-person visits are not required because her boyfriend was able to obtain these drugs. So these are all the risks that are going on. And the importance of this insurance claim data set that we've been talking about is that it reflects real world use of these drugs. So I think it's important to point out that when the FDA claims that serious complications occur in less than 0.5% of women, that's a false number for two reasons. One, they actually chose to exclude severe hemorrhage, which is the most common severe complication related to these drugs. So they excluded that completely, but also that complication rate is based on very controlled clinical trial circumstances. That's not what's happening currently in the way these drugs are being dispensed. And in fact, the FDA, when they removed that in-person dispensing requirement, they stated that they recognized that this was going to lead to more women needing emergency care. And so that is why we as physicians are calling on the FDA again to do their job, because we believe that all of our patients deserve excellent healthcare, that they deserve accurate information about their healthcare. But we also believe that while obviously I want every woman to make a choice that supports her and the life of her child, I want her to make a choice for life. I also believe that even if a woman is going to choose abortion, that doesn't mean that she deserves substandard care. And that's essentially what the FDA is saying right now, is that if you are choosing to take abortion pills, you don't deserve the same level of care that every other woman does. And we are opposed to that. We believe that all of our patients deserve excellent health care.
Yeah. No, and just as a clarifying question, with the FDA's study, the one that you were kind of, poking holes into of the inaccuracies, how long ago was that study done?
Well, so a lot of the data that they're relying on is old data from, 20 plus years ago. But even some of the newer data that they claim to rely upon for some of the more recent changes that they've made are bad studies, actually. They're just not, they have high loss to follow-up rates, or they may say, oh, this study looked at women who didn't have an in-person visit. But then when you look at the characteristics of the women included in the studies, the vast majority of them had already had ultrasounds to ensure that they met the gestational age criteria and that they didn't have ectopic pregnancies. So they already sort of pre-screened those patients out. So again, that's not reflective of the real world. And we're going to drop a link into the show notes. I know a link to a document from the Charlotte Lozier Institute that actually did a really good job back when we were suing the FDA over these changes that they had made a couple of years ago. Lozier did a great analysis of why these studies that they're relying on are not good studies. And so I know we'll put a link to that in the show notes so people can do a deeper dive. And then one other thing that I'd like to point out is that they claim, well, we made all these changes back in 2016 and there was no increase in complications. But one of the changes that were made in 2016 was that they stopped collecting complications other than death. And so,
yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
Data point that they try to claim, but they really can't.
Right. Yeah, and I think what's more frightening too is that going back to mail order abortion pills, you talked about the significant difference between complication rate at 10 weeks versus 13 weeks, some women are getting the pills and they might not be sure how far along they are. And that risk significantly jumps, and having literally zero oversight, compared to, when you are pregnant, like you're going into your OBGYN's office pretty regularly. So it's crazy that the standard of care is far different.
Yeah.
But I want to move on though, because you're talking about holding the FDA accountable. And the commissioner, Dr. McCary, FDA Commissioner Dr. McCary, I'm going to read from this exclusive that he did with the Daily Signal. This was in December of 2025, where he is claiming that the FDA is, quote, in the data acquisition phase, end quote, of this review of chemical abortion pills. And he went on the record to say, quote, we live in a very partisan time, and so you're going to see the echo chambers of social media sort of magnify rumors, things that are just not true. There has been an ongoing review of mifepristone, end quote. So just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, maybe to some people, even pro-lifers that have seen this interview and are like, oh, well, the review is ongoing. It's just going to take time. Maybe pro-lifers are just a little too quick to judge. What would your response be to maybe some of those claims or questions, and just kind of explain the level of urgency AAPLOG has?
Absolutely. Well, I think there's several different responses to some of the things that were said in that interview. One is that the FDA has full access to insurance claims databases. So these are commercial insurance databases as well as Medicaid and TRICARE. The FDA can gain access to the same databases that were used for the EPPC and Restoration America papers that came out last year. So they should have access to that immediately and could have had access to it as of last spring when this was raised to their attention. And so to say that they're still in the middle of a data acquisition phase, I have my doubts about that. I don't know for sure, but I think they have access to those databases at any point in time. So and again, that review, even a very thorough review, should only take a few months with the number of people that they would have available to be able to do that. However, even if they are still in the middle of a data acquisition phase, the claim that, and if I remember right, he said something about as part of the REMS program that mifepristone is under, that they have to do ongoing evaluations and that has been happening. I seriously question that. First of all, if that ongoing evaluation has been happening over the last 26 years now since this drug was approved, where are the results of that ongoing evaluation? To my knowledge, no one has ever seen the results of that. Second, as we pointed out just a little bit ago, in 2016, they stopped collecting complications. So how on earth are they doing an ongoing evaluation when they're not even requiring the reporting of complications? So I have severe concerns over that as well. The other thing is that in our first letter that we sent last year, and then again in this letter that we just sent, we have asked for other things to be done to mitigate the dangers to women of these drugs, and honestly, the number of preborn children's lives who are lost while that safety review is happening. One of the things that we have asked for is, at the very least, just go back to how things were under the first Trump administration, before the Biden administration made the change of taking away that in-person dispensing requirement. That could easily be put back into place immediately. So that could be put back into place immediately. They could start requiring the reporting of complications immediately. So those two things could be done immediately, regardless of what kind of data acquisition phase that they are in. Then, we've asked for that to be done while their safety review is being done. And then, because we know from many studies that are out there, and including this most recent data, that the complications are higher the farther along in pregnancy a woman is, and that women deserve ongoing care, we are asking for the FDA to reinstate essentially the original safeguard. So move it back to 7 weeks of pregnancy, require an in-person visit before a woman gets the drugs, require 2 in-person visits afterwards for adequate follow-up to ensure that she's not experiencing complications, or if she is, that they're being dealt with in a judicious manner. But then we also are asking for something that has actually never been required, but should have been required from the beginning, which is an ultrasound. We know, and this, again, this is not just pro-lifers saying this, we know that any pregnancy that is not dated with an ultrasound is suboptimally dated and oftentimes will be wrong. ACOG, the American College of OBGYNs, who is very pro-abortion and in fact says that ultrasounds are medically unnecessary before chemical abortions. However, in their own documents, they state that 40+% of women will be wrong about how far along they are. And that, again, any pregnancy not dated by an ultrasound should be considered suboptimally dated. So, one, we need an ultrasound to ensure we know how far along a woman is, because she cannot receive individualized, truly informed consent about her individual risks related to taking these drugs unless we know exactly how far along she is and unless we know where her pregnancy is. Is it in the uterus or is it not? And the only way to accurately diagnose an ectopic pregnancy is with an ultrasound. Even a person who can do a wonderful physical exam is going to miss the diagnosis of ectopic pregnancy many, many times. So an ultrasound really is necessary for fully informed consent. And this is something that people on both sides of the abortion issue should be in agreement about, that if we truly believe in the health and safety of women, then we should want them to receive the same kind of care that anybody else deserves and receives oftentimes, in other contexts. So, again, there are actions that the FDA could take immediately, even if they are still in the process of doing their safety review. One final point that I will make is that, you referenced that Commissioner McCary made a comment about in the political climate that we're in, that we may hear things that get blown out of proportion, or that's a paraphrase of what he said, I think. But
Sure.
but I would make the comment actually that as medical groups, we are not the ones that are playing politics here. We are asking for good healthcare for our patients. We are basing that off of the data that exists in the literature, as well as what we're seeing with our own eyes in our emergency rooms. The patients that are suffering, the patients that are dying, our preborn patients that are dying as a result of these dangerous drugs. So we are not the ones playing politics. We are not being led by political wins. We are not being led by the election cycle. We are being led by hard science, and we are being led by compassion for our patients and care that all of our patients deserve dignity and deserve excellent health care.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Like as you were talking about all the different complications and the need for these safeguards, I was just thinking to myself, this is something that both pro-choice people and pro-life people should be able to agree on, because we want women to be safe. And as pro-lifers, certainly we want both women and preborn children to be safe. Um, as we're continuing this chemical abortion pill situation in 2026, we've sent this letter, but how can listeners kind of stay informed and support our efforts in this area? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, this is an issue that I really think AAPLOG, along with the other medical organizations that have joined us on this letter, have really led in informing the public and our patients and the pro-life movement about, because of course, this is an issue dealing with healthcare for patients. And so one way people can follow is to follow us on our social media channels, to follow this podcast, but also if you're not signed up for our updates specifically from AAPLOG Action, which is our advocacy arm, get signed up to be on our list. You can go to aplogaction.org. We'll put that link in the show notes as well, and get signed up for our updates. We will be giving frequent updates. The other thing I would encourage people to do is to contact their members of Congress, so their senators and their representatives, to ask them what they're doing about this issue. So I know that several senators have sent letters to the FDA, and in fact, our letter was sort of spurred on by Commissioner McCary's response to a letter that Senator Cassidy led, asking for answers to this question. Senator Hawley has also been very outspoken on this issue. We're very grateful to him for that. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your member of Congress, to your representative, to your senator, and ask them what are they doing to try and ensure that women are receiving safe care, and that we really uncover the true dangers of this drug. And stay tuned this month too. I think this is, not only is this a perfect time to do this podcast because we just sent this letter, but also, of course, this is Life Month as we look at the National March for Life coming up this month, and remember the anniversary of the Roe decision that thankfully was overturned as it rightfully needed to be. But I think it's important for us not to forget the nearly 50 years that we lived under the Roe regime, and that we don't want to go back to that. And so this is a great month to be focused on this, to learn more about the issue of chemical abortion. Again, we've done many podcast episodes on this. You can look back through our archives and find podcast episodes about this. And then we'll have some resources for you in the show notes as well.
That's fantastic. And like you said, we have so many episodes on this, and we have resources where we want you to be informed so that you're able to talk about this with other people and help spread the word about what chemical abortion pills actually do. Dr. Francis, you've given us so much to think about and just a lot of incredible detail. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, George. Oh, and I just remembered one more thing I want to tell people about too. Specifically, if you are a medical professional and you want to learn more about these kinds of issues, about what the medical evidence says, we have our national conference coming up at the end of February in Seattle, Washington, and registration is still open for that. So we really would love to have you join us. If you're an AAPLOG dues paying member, you get a steeply discounted rate on your registration. So go to conference.applog.org if you want to join us for an amazing weekend with some really amazing speakers. And any medical students, midwifery students, residents who might be listening or watching this podcast, we have scholarships available for you so that you can attend the conference to learn all of this and much more, as well as to network with like-minded medical professionals. It's such a huge encouragement, I know, to so many people. And you can access the scholarship applications. Those are open through the end of January, so you can access those on the conference website as well. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that because if you really want to hear the medical evidence that will help strengthen your argument in support of the lives of your patients, there really is no better place than AAPLOG's National Conference.
Yeah, and we're excited to have that going on, and as it's happening, we'll be posting on social media. Got a lot to say. We'll make you wish you had come. So thank you so much, Christina. If you like this episode, be sure to give it a like. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, or if you're listening on a podcast app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a 5-star review. We'll be seeing you guys on the next couple of episodes, but stay tuned for a little extra something special that is coming that we can't wait to announce to you guys. So come to the next episode, and we'll see you guys there.